what we're going to talk about today is generally about what autism is and what it isn't, because I'm sure you've all heard a few things about autism. You have some information that's correct, some information that's really not correct. It's more fear-based than anything. And the biggest thing to know is that people on the spectrum are very different from each other. They're as individual as all of you sitting in the audience. All of you in the audience are joined by one fact. You're all in the leadership and training program, and you're all wearing those lovely green shirts. But aside from that, I could tick those two things off on the list. Aside from that, you're very, very different from each other. You like different things. You have different talents. You have different skills. You have different things that frighten you. You have your parents would describe you in different ways in terms of whether you're an active person or a quieter person. So we're going to talk about people with autism. You have to know that autism is one thing to know about them, and it is an important thing because it changes the way they interact with the rest of the world, but it's not the only thing to know. So I just want you to put your preconceptions a little bit to the side. We'll talk about things. You can actually interrupt me at any time with a question, okay? If something's not clear and you want to know more about it, then just stick your hand up, no problem. So let's see here. Autism is actually diagnosed by a checklist. It's not diagnosed by a blood test. It's not diagnosed by some other medical exam. A child goes into a doctor's office or a psychiatrist's office or a psychologist's office, and they watch their behavior, they talk to the parents, and they tick off a couple of points. If you get enough tick marks, then you fall into the spectrum, which is called autism. If you get a full group of check marks, they say you have autism. There are a few. I told you there's no blood test. Well, for a few of the syndromes, there are actually blood tests and known genetic causes to a few of the autism syndromes. One is Fragile X, boys with specific physical features and also severe autism. Another one is Rett syndrome, all girls. Rett syndrome is a difficult one because in Rett syndrome you have different neurological things happening where development's going this way and other neurological factors are pushing back against development. It's one where you'll see skills develop and then disappear again, so that's a tough one. But for most of the people that you'll meet where now, especially now where the diagnosis of autism has been expanded and people are throwing around numbers like 1 in 88 or 1 in 50, you know people with autism. You already know people with autism. They are all around you, and some have a diagnosis and some don't, and some of those characteristics that people call autism, you have too. So the autism spectrum is just a piece of the human spectrum. Two of the names or diagnoses that you might hear about, and they're all over the news, the popular news, and out into Twitter and Facebook and things like that. You'll hear these words in the new diagnostic manual. These are no longer diagnoses, but what they mean is they're autism spectrum disorders. Asperger's syndrome, people are very, very bright, very verbal, but socially, well, it's more than awkward. Socially awkward, social things are formidably difficult for them. PDD-NOS is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. That's a diagnosis that has been sort of a term that people use when they don't want to say, well, it's autism, or they don't want to say it's Asperger's. It's just like he's got enough of these features. So all of these go together into autism spectrums. And the spectrum, it's a circle, now it's a line. Initially, when autism was first described, way back in 1940-something, Kanner described a group of boys who were socially isolated, who were nonverbal, who did things like rocking, who seemed to be in their own bubble and not interacting with other people. So at the same time, only publishing out of Nazi Germany, was Hans Asperger. And he described a group of boys who were highly verbal, highly intelligent, but were socially unusual and had a lot of difficulty interacting with other people. Now we say it's all aspects of the same thing. You may hear terms like high functioning and low functioning. Really hard to say high functioning and low functioning, given now that a certain number of the people who are nonverbal, you may have heard of Carly Fleischman. She's someone who's out on Facebook. She's your age. And she is profoundly nonverbal, and she types to talk, and she is gifted. So you can't tell by a person's verbal level what their intellectual level is. Out here in this gray area, I would say that's where I am. I am eccentric. One of the reasons that I'm good with people with autism is I share a certain number of features with people with autism. So I learned, when I was your age, I learned a lot of my social skills by logic. I was just a person who is slightly unusual, and so there's eccentric people, unusual social skills, high intellect. If you go to places like universities, especially into the math and physics department, I am a reformed math and physics geek, you will find a lot of people who share a number of characteristics with people on the spectrum. So what that tells you is that these are not deviant characteristics. These are not horrible things. These are just characteristics of how people are neurologically wired, where their skills lie, where their difficulties lie. So autism, when people say a person has autism, it's a descriptor of a piece of them, an important piece, but it's not all of them. And the features you will find as the presentation goes by that you share a certain number of these things too, would be my guess. John Elder Robison is a really interesting adult who has Asperger's syndrome, and he was diagnosed when he was 40. And he refers to, he says, okay, so this is the spectrum, this is the autism spectrum. The other people, sometimes people on the spectrum refer to us as neurotypicals. He likes to call us nipicals. So from here on in the presentation, there'll be autism spectrum, and then there'll be nipicals. You guys are nipicals. It's a variety. You will, when you meet, people often say, this is almost becoming a cliche, if you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum. But it is very true, because they are very, very different from each other, as different as you guys are. The common features that they share are problems with communication. Now, you guys are all doing really well just listening to this as it goes along. If you're struggling, I can't see it, and some of you may be, and maybe you're just quietly struggling. But generally, it's not hard for you to sit here and to listen and to take in and to think about what's coming to you in verbal language. If I were to switch to a language which you didn't know as well, or I didn't know as well, if I knew it well and you didn't, you would find suddenly that the presentation had really sped up. And you would be frantic to try to pick up all of the pieces. For people on the autism spectrum, that's a huge challenge, the auditory processing. So people with good language skills, they can understand in a quiet place or when things are going slowly. Suddenly, when you get them out into the hubbub, especially of a camp or something like that, all of a sudden they act like they're deaf. They don't know what you said, or you think, I told him this and he's doing this. So that's an auditory processing problem, which is a language problem. Worse than that, though, are the social problems. In terms of, I say worse than that, it's worse than that if you're out in a group. When you're by yourself in your room, autism is not generally a problem. It's just, you get to relax there and be yourself. When a person with autism is asked to come out and interact with the larger world of nipicals, many of whom are actually not that patient, not that sensitive, and not that accommodating to autism. Social communication difficulties are invisible. Social communication challenges are your ability to read other people's body language. How many of you are confident that I won't hurt you? Only some. Okay. You are reading a lot of cues that you don't even know. First of all, you know that in this circumstance, it's very unlikely for the presenter to make a leap over top of the orchestra pit and start grabbing you and hitting you. Okay, that's not something that's within the usual things that you think might happen. Also, though, you're reading my body language, you're reading my facial expression, you're reading my tone of voice. If suddenly I were to start ticking, if I were to start looking angry or turning my back to you or doing other odd things, you would immediately become uncomfortable. And you would start to, within your head, think something's going wrong. I've got to prepare myself because I might need to get out of here. At the very basic level, social communication tells you whether you're safe or whether you're not. So imagine yourself without any of that information. You're in a foreign country, there's a large mob approaching, and they don't speak your language, and they're loud, and they're running and sweeping down the street towards you. What do you do? Who's nervous now? Yeah, well, you should be, because it might be dangerous. On the other hand, it might be like a Canada Day celebration. It might be running the bulls, though. So it might be there might be cows, big cows coming afterwards. You just don't know. So when you're stripped of those cues, your first thing is panic, stress, and I got to get away. So the kids that you have on the autism spectrum who are coming into your programs do not have access to those cues. So if they seem stressed, if they seem worried, they have a very good reason to be, because they don't know what you're going to do next. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking in this presentation about the ways that you can communicate in a different way. You can put information out there in a different way to help them to feel calm. The way they're coming at the world is not wrong. It is just particular to them. That's how they're neurologically wired. They have sensory differences. A lot of the people on the spectrum would not be able to take the brightness of these lights or the echo that comes back in this room. There's a sound, there's a buzz from the projector. There's a lot of different things. You might have itchy clothes on. Some people on the spectrum have to turn their clothes inside out because they can't stand the feeling of the seams against their skin. It's a neurological difference. And you get different kinds of behavior, which is something that people may have spoken to you about. So you may see, for instance, you may see people doing things like this, okay? Doing flicks, or doing flaps, or doing other kinds of sometimes movement patterns that are just stereotype movement. And you'll say, that's odd. Why is that happening? But oftentimes what it can reflect, sometimes it's just a happy thing. It's just a, you know what? I feel happy, I feel great, and this is how I'm showing it. Where another kid might go, yay, that's great. This is happy. Ooh, that's exciting, that's great. Or it may reflect a rising in stress. It's sort of like, I don't know what's going on, and so you might be getting some stuff like this. And those are signs to you that stress is rising. So the patterns, the behavior patterns, they may seem unusual when you first see them, but they are just really just an overrun of neurology and a different way of doing things. If you have a 5-year-old kid in your program who goes, yay, I love sand, then you say, oh, that kid loves sand. If you have a kid who sees the sand and goes, yee, then you say, that's very odd. But it's the same thing. It's, I love sand. I can't wait to get in the sandbox. It's not wrong. It's just different. There's also a lot of talents on the spectrum. A lot of really great intellect and talent. Many of the kids are extremely good at computer and technical things. A lot of the kids, I have kids on my caseload that I have known since they were 2 and 3. Now they're at university and they are excelling. They're at the top of their programs in things like science and math. There's math. I have kids that I've worked with who are amazing artists. You'll see some of their art here today of some of the kids, which is good. There's also writing. Some of the kids and adults are excellent writers. What they can't easily say, they can write. And many, many talented musicians. So what you're looking at is you're looking at a group of people with high intellect, some unusual things in terms of dealing with the large and loud and group-oriented social world, and just many, many wonderful talents. And what I want you to do, I think, is when you look at people on the spectrum, I want you to see what they are instead of what they're not. So many programs lead with a deficit first. Say, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Isn't that weird? I want you to look at the kids instead in a flip way. Say, he can do this, he can do this, he can do this, he can do this. So let's change things over that way. The kids are not wrong. They are just themselves. They are unusual in some ways. They're interesting. They're fabulous people. You'll like them. I guarantee it. Oh, and athletes. My friend, actually, if you want to see a really great athlete with autism who's in this area, Tommy DeBrise, he has a YouTube channel and he has a Facebook page, and he's a lovely guy, and he runs like the wind. He is a really, really talented runner. He's been active since he was a little boy, which was the point when I met him. And but his family has helped him turn that high activity into a skill. He runs really well. He does canoe kayak. He rock climbs. He does all kinds of things, and he does them all very, very well. High skills. Now, this picture shows what my friend Adam is 22 now, I guess, 22 or 23. And he is not very verbal. If you spoke to him, he might be able to give you some language back, but not a lot. It's not his best tool. But he has learned over the years, he has developed drawing as communication. And he is a very, very bright person who can put things out in a picture that help you to understand what it's like inside his head. A little while ago, a couple of months ago, his sister, his older sister, took him out on an outing, she and her boyfriend. They went to McDonald's, which is one of his favorite places to go. He loves McDonald's. When they got in there, his sister knew immediately there was going to be a problem because the place was full of little kids. Too many little kids. When Adam drew this, it took him actually about an hour and a half to draw all those little kids. Because they all, if you look at them, they all have different features and different details on them and things like that. It was terrifying for him. All of his life, he's had trouble with the babies. I think it's because they're down here. He can't read them even as well as he reads other people. They do unpredictable things. They're very, very loud. They're terrifying. So when he got to McDonald's and found that the place was all full of terrifying little children, what he did was he wanted to stay there, and his sister knew what the problem was because she knew him very well, and so she knew he wanted to stay there, so they made it work. They made it work, and the sister and the boyfriend tag teamed to get the food from the counter and everything like that, and Adam had his iPad, and they kept him, he kept calm, he kept himself calm, and he tolerated all the little kids. By the time he got out of McDonald's, though, the whole rest of the afternoon that had been planned, all things that he loves to do, that he wanted to do, that he asked to do, was shot. They had to go through the different pieces of it, but he just couldn't manage it. They went to chapters, but he was in and he was out. And then, unfortunately for them, another twist happened. Laura, his sister, forgot her money. And she didn't have her wallet. So they had to leave all the things that he chose for chapters, leave them at the desk, and deal with the wallet. And Adam kept himself together. And there are some very funny pictures, and you can find them actually on the blog. There's the story is out there on my blog of how they dealt with it. By the time Adam came home, after dealing with all of those things, he was done. For the rest of the day, he was done. There's a woman who posts on Facebook. It's another page I would recommend you look at, Carla's ASD page. She's an adult who has a high position in a tech company. She's very, very successful. She also has full-blown autism. And she is very direct about the fact that there are only a certain number of tokens of energy that she has every day to spend. And that social things like this, trying to manage things that are really fundamentally unmanageable, take the tokens away. So you will find sometimes with the kids that you work with that they are on their last nerve, or you go through something which seems usual to you, but suddenly they're on the floor, they're done, they can't do the next thing, and you're like, but he loves that, he always wants to do that. Maybe he spent all his tokens on something like this, and you don't know that that's the case. The most important perspective when dealing with autism, and the one that unfortunately can frequently be neglected as people rush to try to be helpful, is the perspective of the person with autism themselves. There is no perspective more important than the person with autism themselves. And when they are less verbal, it can be hard to figure that out. And oftentimes, you guys are dealing with younger kids, correct? Most of the kids that you're dealing with are younger? Okay. When the kids are little, they are much more one raw nerve. And so things that Adam couldn't stand at all when he was little, that would have sent him screaming out, as an adult he can manage, but it costs him in his energy. When you have them are dealing with little kids, sometimes you're going to get the screaming mimes, a big reaction for something that you don't understand. You don't know what's triggered it. So in terms of your programs, you're going to have to do a lot of talking to the families and things to find out what are the triggers. But you're also going to have to know that every time you get a reaction, there's a reason. There's always a reason, and the kids are not trying to be difficult. They are never trying to be difficult. They may be trying to escape you, but they're not trying to be difficult. Okay, this is Adam again. When he was in grade 4, it goes back to the whole thing about the babies. He was very fussed about a program that was put in place having him say hi to other people in the hallway. And first of all, it's socially odd to say hi to every single person you meet in a hallway. If you did it, people would look at you strangely. So that's the first thing. But anyway, be that as it may, he was extremely distressed, like beyond distressed, about having to say hi to a certain number of kids, tick, tick, tick on a list, going down a hallway. So I drew this picture for him to try to find out what was wrong. So here's the next thing that he drew. Anybody know what that is? Slamming door. Do you know where he is? Almost. Think where he was. He's in the locker. He's looking out at that hideous smiling girl through the slats in the locker. That scary, scary girl. Look at his face. Is there anything unclear about that facial expression? No. It is terrifying to him. It is terrifying to him. This is not good for him. She's gone. He's fine. So at that point in time, we couldn't figure out all of the reasons why it was so scary for him, but it was clear that it was. So that program, out. All right? When you know this information, if you had another kid come to you in camp and say, you know what, I just am really, really scared of those big red pool noodles. They look like blood to me. I saw a vampire movie and those red pool noodles look like blood. I can't see them. I don't want to look at them. Then would you make the kid go out and look at 5 red pool noodles a day? I hope not. It would be crazy because it doesn't matter. Looking at red pool noodles is not an essential life skill. But oftentimes when people on the spectrum show fear, very reasonable fear of different things, we devise programs that say, well, you know what, he's just got to get used to that because those things are in the world. And we have to pay attention because you don't want the kids you're working with to be in that state. If they're in that state, then they are one hair away from losing it completely. Your goal is to try to make things calm around them. And if they can't change, you change. So let's take a look here. All right. So you've got to accommodate them. You accommodate, and then you try to figure out why. let's talk about actually this whole next part is how it is that you can actually go after some of the usual suspects, the things that are often wrong when kids are upset if they have autism. One of the things is sensory sensitivity. Light, smells, sound, textures, movement, touch can all be really, really, really strong for a person on the spectrum. Temple Grandin talks about the fact that she has to always have her underwear turned inside out, because if she doesn't, the scratching of those seams on her skin is so overwhelming that she can't think, she can't process, she can't talk, she can't do a lot of things because all she can feel are those seams on her. In a recreational setting, you are going to run into a lot of places where sensory things may be overwhelming. Fluorescent lights in the pool, okay? Just the feel of wet bathing suits, wet pool noodles, wet whatever. Dealing with things in the change room of noise and sound, and too many bodies compressed in a small place. There's many, many places where it will just be overwhelming and unmanageable for the person with autism. When you see that a person is uncomfortable in a situation, that's one of the things that you should look at. You should say to yourself, okay, he was fine as we were walking down the hall. As soon as we walked into the pool enclosure, he fell on the floor and started to refuse to do anything. Okay, something about that. Maybe it was the door, maybe it was this. You have to go then and be a bit of like a CSI problem solver. You have to think it through, and you have to start going after the things that it might be until you bring that person back into a calm state of mind. If the person's verbal, then you may already know. Talk to the families as well and say, look, you know what? He was fine today until we came inside. Do you know any reason why he might have freaked out? Or he was fine today until we went outside. Both Anne and I know a person who was deathly afraid of birds. And so every time he went outside, it was a great fear of his that the birds would come swooping down and that something bad would happen. You can't reason a person out of that kind of fear. If their system is jangling alarm bells, then you have to change what you're doing. Unusual pain responses. This is a big one for you guys in terms of safety, because sometimes a very small thing, like a tiny pinprick on the back of a hand, might elicit huge screams and whatever. But I've also known people who have walked on broken ankles. So you have to keep an eye and see what's actually happened, because you can get both hypersensitivity, a small scratch feeling really terrible, or hyposensitivity, where something that's actually severe and dangerous is not felt very much by the person. Different systems. Allergies. How many of you have allergies? Okay. What are you allergic to? Peanuts. Cats? Cats and dogs. Okay. Pardon? Nuts? Okay. Yes? All right, so those are all kind of usual allergies, you know, peanuts, cats and dogs, things like that. And so nobody looks at you, nobody looks at you badly if you are actually allergic to something like that. So on the spectrum, there are very unusual allergies. You'll have kids who have responses to perfumes. You'll have kids who have responses to molds and mildews. You'll have people who have bad responses to bleach, to all kinds of unusual things. So once again, if you see a quick, strange reaction, it might be something like that. Ask the families. Fears and phobias are often based on things that are like allergies. What generally happens when you don't deal with these kind of basic physical things is you have kids and adults in this state. You can't teach a person who's in a panic. You can't teach a person who's in pain. You can't teach a person who is in fear and stress response.
Do individuals with autism hurt themselves?
That's a good question. Do individuals with autism hurt themselves? Sometimes. Sometimes. Sometimes what happens is when a person with autism is very, very upset, they may hurt themselves. In some ways, it's an expression of how much they are hurting. So, for instance, I'm mad at you, you might get this. Okay? So what you need to do is you need to keep the person safe. So if you have a person who is so frustrated and upset that they're doing something like pounding their arm or otherwise doing something that is going to hurt them, then you have to find a way to help calm that down. So sometimes what you can do is you can put a soft surface in between the fist and the arm or something like that. Your responsibility is to help them not injure themselves, and then also to respond to what is beneath that behavior. What's the communication? If you could put words to it, what would it be? I don't know what you just said to me. You gave me so many instructions, and I'm terrified, and so I'm going to show you this way. So that's the way to do it. But it is also, I would say, that if you're seeing any self-injury, that's the time go to your supervisor right away, because that's something which is kind of a little bit above your pay grade, and you want to be sure that nobody gets hurt. Kids should be approaching you, all right? Even people with autism, they should not be doing this. If you have this response, then you have to take a look and see what are you doing. First of all, are you familiar to that person? Do they know you at all? You can make yourself familiar by introducing yourself before you even meet the child, by sending digital photos, having a little bit of a digital video. This is me. Hi, my name is Brian. I like cats, and I have a Nintendo Wii. Something that lets the kids see you before they actually have to meet you in the real world. Speed and how close you are. Lots of times we move really fast and we get too close to other people. We talk too fast, we move too fast, we make ourselves frightening because we're just, we're too shocking, all right? So sometimes just simply by slowing down, by moving a little bit more slowly, by standing a little bit farther back from a child, you can get them to stop fleeing from you and actually give them room to approach you. It's sort of like, how can I miss you if you won't go away? If you're too much pursuing a person with autism, then it's uncomfortable. Loudness. Okay, you're in a camp environment. There's lots of songs and shouting and chants and group games, right? Very, very loud. You need to consider that it may not be the best thing for the person with autism to be in the middle of that. If they want to be, sure. But if you notice every time that happens, they're heading the other way, you have to pay attention to that, and you don't make them stay in a place that they can't manage. Let's see here. Be predictable. Be predictable. So, what if every time I meet you in the morning, I say a knock-knock joke? Maybe it's not a great knock-knock joke, but it's something you come to expect. That's one of the ways that you might, if you have a child who likes that kind of thing, if you start off every day like that, or if you start off every day talking about the scores in the hockey game from the night before, or you start off every day by doing a little drawing of a face, or whatever it is, you make yourself predictable. You make yourself familiar and predictable. The child can calm down because they know what it is you're going to do. Okay, this is a big one, and it's both the boys and the girls, for sure, because now we're in the age of Axe, right? And all the commercials that everyone will flock towards you if you smell exactly the right way. This is a big, big problem, a big problem. I would say that if you're working in an environment where there's people with autism, unscented products, no big dangly jewelry and things like that. You have to make yourself a little more neutral in that way, because sometimes what you're doing too is you're setting off allergies. I know a boy who, when he smells Axe in the school hallway, within 5 minutes he can no longer speak, he can no longer hear you, and he has to go lie down and he gets a migraine for a day. He can't help it. He can't get used to it because it's a physical response. All right. Language level. We talk too much. We talk too fast. You chunk your language. You make it simple, but you don't condescend. You don't go, oh, honey, oh, not like that. You're not talking down to people, but you're saying things like, time for the pool. Time for the pool. Okay? Change room first. Go to the change room. You talk in chunks. You leave pauses in between for processing. You give kids a chance to hear the language, understanding that it's like you if someone's giving directions in a language that you kind of know but you don't really know. One more thing here, I think. Okay. We're going to go through some of these in more detail in the other slides, but here's the most important thing. Kids on the spectrum, adults on the spectrum, have as much as they have difficulty with social things, they know if you like them. They know it. They know who likes them, they know who doesn't. And so what you have to ask yourself as you're dealing with the kids is, do I like them? Do I really like them? And it's okay also if the answer is, I'm not compatible with that. But following that is, don't inflict yourself upon them either. So you have to find a way to see what's great about those people that you're working with. What's great, just like with any kid who you're working with in any camp group, you have to actually like them, because if you don't like them, you're not going to be that effective with them. All right. This is a picture drawn by my friend Brett, who is now actually he's becoming he's a video game guy, and he's learning how to he's in the video game program at Algonquin. He's an excellent artist. He's very, very descriptive in his drawings. He's verbal. So this was a girl who sat beside him in school who would not shut up. She never shut up. She talked on and on about nothing. I'm sure you all know people like this. And so then I was, on the weekend, and so we were all going out. Did you go out on the weekend? We went out on the weekend. We went out. Did you see that movie? You know that movie, that Terminator? Anyway, we went, and John was there, and Bob was there, and I was with, and they talk and talk and talk, and every piece of space that there exists, they talk. So this was Brett, who just wished that there was a zipper on her mouth. He did not do this to her. He didn't touch her. He didn't even yell at her. But he was totally unhinged by her. So one of the things, it may be you or it may be another kid in the group, you have to be prepared to move people with autism away from background noise. And the worst kind of background noise is talking. The very, very worst kind of background noise. It can't be ignored. It interferes with processing. It drives people crazy. Is the blah, 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 blah background of any group situation. This is what Brett actually did following that picture. So here's this picture, blah, blah, blah. And then he yelled at the entire class to shut up. Oftentimes, people on the spectrum, some of them are verbal and some of them have different kinds of communication, and oftentimes the entire world goes so fast that the message that the kids get is, I'm not interested in what you have to say, I don't have time to hear what you have to say, and don't talk. Don't tell me something that I don't want to hear. Don't tell me no when I want to hear yes. This is a picture that Adam drew, actually, a little while ago. You have to know the communication system of the individual that you're working with. You have to know if that person is verbal, if they're partly verbal, or if they don't speak. And if they don't speak, do they type to talk? Do they draw to talk? Do they point to pictures to talk? PECS is a picture communication system where you have pictures on a board and they can indicate what they want by pointing to a picture. Some people with autism use sign language. If you don't know the person's communication system, then basically they're left without a voice. They have no voice. They can't tell you what they want. They can't tell you what they need. They can't tell you when they're in danger or when they're upset or when they're in pain. So even the most verbal person can lose their verbal skills when they are stressed. So you have to have communication systems available wherever you go. And I know that Holly, in your program, has developed for you different things like pictures on key rings, some picture boards, Holly. Those kinds of things are very, very necessary. Sometimes, too, because of the reason that none of the information is coming in through the person's ears. And so you have to be able to point to something to let them know, look, we're choosing between snack and going over to play in the playground. So you need to make a choice here. Or we're going from here, we're going into the change room. We're going from the park to the change room. And I can show you a picture and let you know that that's where we're going. Or you can tell me, no, there's no way on earth that I'm going inside right now. That's the other thing, is that when you give a person a communication system, you have to accept answers which are maybe not the most convenient answers. Do you want to go inside? No, I don't. That's the answer. And then you go from there. But just like with any other child that you're working with, what do you generally do with a child if you're saying it's time for us to do this and they say, no, I'm not going to do it? What skills have you learned so far? Distract them. Okay. Yeah. Offer them a reward, going to the thing that you want to do, so that they first will do this, then you can do this. There's a lot of different things that you can negotiate, but the last thing you want to do is be dragging a person through a schedule of things, because that's what the group is going to do, and ignoring the communication that they're giving to you. The other thing that you need to know is whenever you're using a communication system that is not verbal, it's slower. So even when a person can type at a very high level to talk and to tell you very complicated thoughts, it takes a long time. And so you must accommodate that. You must make time to let the person say what they really want to say. And if that inconveniences your larger schedule, then that's the way it is. Because if you don't listen when a person is talking, then they know that their language is not powerful. Their communication is not powerful, and so then they have to go the next step to ramp it up to behavior. Any child in your program without autism, any typical child, will protest, will throw a tantrum if you're not listening to them and you're just trying to drag them through the activities of the day. And I don't think that you do that either, because generally when a person says, I can't do that, I don't want to do that, I can't do it because I don't have my princess outfit. My mom didn't remember to put my princess outfit in the bag, and she said she was going to. And if I don't have my princess outfit, how can I possibly go to this next thing? So oftentimes when kids are verbal and highly verbal, then you let them do a lot of stuff that's outside of a regular routine because they told you why. Because they said, look, well, I want to do this and I want to do that, and don't you know my cousin's coming today and I'm supposed to be leaving early, and my mom said I'm supposed to be leaving early, but she forgot to give the note. A person with autism who's nonverbal knows they're supposed to be leaving early because grandma's coming and mom didn't remember the note, and so they're stopping because they know it's the time that they're supposed to go meet grandma, and you're trying to drag them to the next thing because you don't know. You have to be able to listen, to know the communication system, and to listen to what they have to say. All right. Visual things are helpful to clarify auditory information. Okay? You heard here that it's not always easy to hear what other people have to say. But not all visuals are created equal. What does this one mean? Fire, run. Okay. Fire what? Fire, no running. Fire, run, fire, no running. Any other guesses? It's not particularly clear. It might mean, if you've set yourself on fire, do not run. Things like this is actually from an emergency response website. Not every visual that you make, just because you have a picture doesn't mean that you've made it clear to the person you're talking to. So the clarity of your visual information you'll see it in the results. If the visual works, if the person seems to understand what's going on, then the visual's good. If it's not, don't love your visual, change it up. It's very, very easy now in the age of digital phones and well, especially your phone, because your phone, how many people have their phone with them right now? Of course you do. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got a phone. How many people's phones take pictures? Okay, video? Yep, okay. So it's very, very easy now to make visuals, and don't mess around with visuals that don't make sense. Just because it's been given to you and says that everybody thinks that this means this, the child that you're working with may not understand it at all. So here's ways that you can use good visuals. Social stories. How many people have heard of the concept of social stories? It's a big thing in autism, but people tend to use them not always in the best way. A good social story increases the predictability, increases the person's information about what's going to happen and what's going to happen next. Typically developing kids, Nipicals, know this because they ask questions. If their mom says, we're going to Dovercourt, they say, why are we going to Dovercourt? And mom says, we're going swimming. Well, if I'm going swimming, I only want to bring my green bathing suit. Can I have my green bathing suit if I'm going to Dovercourt? Yes, you can have your green bathing suit if you're going to Dovercourt. Is it going to be Louise? Who's my teacher today? Well, I don't know. It might be Louise, it might be Tracy. I'm only going if it's Louise. Okay, well, we'll ask when we get to the desk. Is that all right? Yes, that's all right. So they check out all the details verbally, back and forth with you. Typical kids do not go any place where they don't know what's going to happen, because it feels dangerous. It doesn't feel comfortable. So social stories are a way to make the unpredictable predictable. So here, this is a social story about a kid who's going to school or going to swimming lessons. First, I'm going to walk to swimming with mom. I'm going to hang up my backpack and my coat. When I get to the locker room, I'll change into my swimsuit. Okay, that takes them through all that sequence of events. They're comfortable, they know what's happening. You show it to them ahead of time, they can ask questions. You take down the fear factor. So that's one use of social stories, is just making a normal schedule clear. Now that you're in the age of video and digital photos, you have so many, many, many benefits. You can do this so easily, so much better. Before you take a child to camp, do a video walkthrough of where they're going to go. If you have a child who's afraid to go into the change room, then you walk through the change room and you give a narration. Okay, here we are at the door of the change room. Now we're going in. I'm walking right over to where your hook is. See, look, it's got your name on it. There's your name. There's Bob's hook. You're going to put your coat here and then you put it in. You're going to put your bag, you put it in. You walk them through the whole sequence. You send that video home before that person ever comes into your environment. That can be watched and watched. Questions can be asked. There can be a comfort level. Meeting new staff. Video walkthroughs, very, very good. Online videos of similar activities. If you use, Google is your friend. Okay, Google and YouTube. If you go on YouTube and you Google and you put in swimming lessons, or even a specific skill that you're going to teach in a swimming lesson, there's lots and lots of short clips that already show how that's going to go and what the instructor will do and what the child will do or the adult will do. So those are things that you can do to take down the panic. Personal photos. You can take pictures of the environment, you can take pictures of the person themselves in the environment, make it into a book, make a story, get them comfortable so that there's fewer and fewer unknowns, no surprises. You can look at it at a safe distance when you're not in the middle of the chlorine and the fluorescent lights and the many, many hundreds of other kids. You can make it clear what's going on. Here's a visual schedule. Very, very easy to do. Warm up, tick. Flutterboard, tick. Jellyfish float, tick. Humans do not like to be taken through unknown activities without explanation, without knowing how long they're going to last, without knowing why they're doing it, or without choosing it. So here's what you're doing is you help the kids to go through a schedule, to feel how long it's going to be, and to have something that they really want at the end. Now, because everything's electronic, this was just drawn on the iPad, it's so easy to change things up. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be a little bit of stuff on a paper. It can be something on an iPad. It can be something you made on your computer and slip into a plastic sleeve. Very, very easy to make visuals that will go with you. Visual jigs are another thing. They're basically if this, then that. First this, then that. This is a visual jig for how to play Go Fish, the card game. I'm sure you've all played Go Fish. And it puts it out in a visual way. Name, Bob, do you have a 2? Yes, if you do, you got to give it over, make a pair, ask again. No, go fish, pick up a card, your turn's over. Very, very simple. But it's a visual way of showing what the if this, then that is. In a game situation, it could be the games that you're playing outdoors at camp, games of tag. What kind of games do you guys play in the camps usually? Group games? Yes? No? Red Rover? I don't know. I'm a different generation. What do you do when the kids are gathering? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you can take the rules of those games. You can actually do it a couple of ways. Here's some suggestions. One way is you can take all the LITs and you can play a mock game with a narrator. Gavin is the one who's it. And he's going to run over here and look, he touched Bob. And that's because he touched Bob, Bob does this. And you play it out, you let them see it, they know how the game goes. You're going to get a lot more happy participation than if you're trying to drag a child through something that they don't even know what's going on. Transitions, terrible. Very, very difficult. If I'm safe here in the sandbox, things are going well for me and I can stand it and I finally feel calm. If you're the one who comes to say to me, you got to get out of the sandbox, I'm not going to be happy with you. Changing from one activity to another, especially after a person is settled into an activity, is hard for a lot of reasons, but mostly it's safety and not understanding or not being aware of the passage of time. So if I'm asking the other kids to line up, they have a lot of cues. The other kids are looking up and they're seeing the leader is starting to gather all the balls and put them in the bag. That means we're probably leaving the playing field soon. Oh, look, she's got the bag over there and she's getting out her whistle, which is the whistle that tells us that things are over. The other kids are starting to move over that way, so I know it's almost time for us to go to the change room. The typical kids have a lot of cues before you go, time for the change room. The person with autism, not getting those cues at all. So that for them, the first thing that they hear about the change is, I'm happy, I'm playing over here, I'm doing what I want to do. Tweet, you got to get out of here. If you did that to all the kids, they would all have a protest. If you do it to a person with autism, then they're going to have a protest, you're going to have a problem, you're going to have a challenge. So many things that you can do for transition supports. Visual timers are good. So a minute before or 5 minutes before, you go over and you say, you know what? In 5 minutes we're going to the change room. I'm going to put the timer right here. In 5 minutes we're going to go to the change room. And there's a picture of the change room. That's the next thing. The next thing is the change room. Then at 3 minutes you go over, remember, 3 minutes, it's going to be the change room. We're going to get our stuff. We're going to go to the change room. I'll tell you when it's 1 minute. So you have things that help the kids to see that it's going to change. You also might have a transition object. So it might not be a picture. It might be, I'm bringing over your bag with your bathing suit. You're going to need this in a minute because we're going to go to the change room. We're going to get changed. We're going to go to the pool. You know how much you like the pool. Basically, for all of your things, you're going to show more than talk. Okay? Don't talk. You're going to say, if I want someone to learn the front crawl, I am going to go into the water and I'm going to say, move your arms like this. Move them like this. I'm going to show it and I'm going to say, big arms, remember, big arms. Then I'm going to show it again. And then I'm going to have the person do it. So you talk less, you show more. How much do you tell the kids around about the person with autism? Again, if you start from a position of respect, you won't go very far wrong. Kids know when another kid is different. And if you don't give them some clear information, they'll make their own conclusions. So here's one way that a teacher that I know talked to a group of young kids about the person with autism in their class, which I thought was really good. She took them all out to the garden at the back of the school, and it was like a natural garden, and she showed them how it was that different plants grew in different environments, and how some loved the sunshine and were all full of bright color, and some liked to hide in the corners, and some, you know, liked to grow near the rocks and things, and how some were big and showy and some were quieter but soft and lovely. So she talked about that first, and then she said, you know, people are like that too. People have different personalities. Some people are quieter, some people are louder, some people like this and some people like that. Talked about the kids' own likes and dislikes, what they were afraid of and what they felt they were good at and what they felt they weren't good at. And then just said, you know, for Tommy, let's say, it's really hard for him when the group is big and when the group is loud. You're better off to talk in terms of concrete details. Say, you know, you'll find sometimes if you're too loud beside him, he might yell back at you. And that's because it means you're too loud, and when you're too loud, it makes him upset, and then he can't think, and so he loses his words and he yells. He doesn't mean to hurt your feelings, and he's not mad, he's scared. So it's a little bit of the version of the same kind of thing that we've been talking about here, where you help them to see that the behavior is not everything, and also that it's not meant to hurt and not meant to be rude or mean. And what's interesting to me because I've done talks like this for young kids, what's interesting to me is the kindness of children. When they have some good information and you tell them how they can be helpful. You know, it would be really great if you want to talk to them. It's easier if you go over and you share the iPad with him and you play the game that goes back and forth. He'll like that. He doesn't want to play the game with the big ball because that's more scary for him. And the kids are very, very kind when you give them ways to be kind and you foster a real interaction, not a condescending, oh, look at the poor boy with autism, but real friendships develop and the kids start to see the things that the kids are good at. And that's the other thing that I would say in terms of showing the kids in your group about the kids with autism is arrange circumstances that highlight the skills of the person with autism. So if they're really good at music, have a chance for them to play something on the piano for the other kids. If they're really great at computer or they're really great at you know, some athletic skills, have a game or have a circumstance where they can show what they're good at, so that you don't, the picture that the other kids have is not just poor so-and-so, look, he can't do anything. These are going to happen, okay? And this is probably, if you've heard about autism, you've heard a lot about when the kids or the adults lose it completely, when they're very, very upset. It happens. All right. You don't know what's underneath the stress. Let me show you one child. It's springtime. They have bad springtime allergies. Too many kids at McDonald's. Okay, this is before their swim lesson. We're late for the swim lesson because we had to deal with too many kids at McDonald's. Bob's not in class. And Bob's the kid that I always copy. He's the kid who always knows what's going on, and if I'm by Bob, things will be safe. And then I forgot my flip-flops. That's the piece that you see. You see a child who opens their bag, the flip-flops aren't in there, wah! And it's a big, loud upset. Okay? A meltdown. But let's think about you guys. Sometimes, I'm sure, you don't get enough sleep. How many of you drink coffee? All right, okay, so if you're a coffee drinker, no coffee that morning, Mom didn't buy it. Family argument, because you said something to Mom about the fact she forgot the coffee and she didn't take it well. So that was loud before you left. And then, finally got a coffee on the way to work and spilt it all over yourself. So now the only pair of clothes that you have for the entire day covered in coffee. And, uh-oh. Lauren has changed the meeting time. She wants to talk to us 5 minutes earlier. than I thought she would, so I don't even have time to go and put on another shirt in the change room. So this kind of thing leads to meltdowns. Everybody has had them, and I'm sure actually if I asked you know, anybody close to you, oftentimes it's your family members who feel the meltdowns. Oftentimes when we have a lot of social constraints on us, we hold our meltdowns in when we're in social situations. We're less likely to with our families. For the kids on the spectrum, they are going to melt down at times. What it looks like is often big anger. But what it is stress and panic and sadness and fear and all kinds of other emotions underneath. It looks like anger. So this is Brett at a ski lesson. And what the ski instructor saw was this kid coming up to him almost at the end of the lesson saying, could you redo that lesson? And the ski instructor's like, what? That makes no sense. And then he lost it. But here's what happened before that. What happened before that was they're at the top of the hill and the binding didn't work on Brett's ski, so he couldn't get it in, so he's sort of annoyed. So he's trying to get his boot into the binding, and you can see, wah, 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 the instructor is talking. What's he saying? Nobody knows, because he's trying to get the boot in. The little dots way down the hill are the rest of the class. Brett finally got his boot into the binding, and he's chasing off after them down the hill. There he is, he's sweating, but he's got an idea. He's not totally panicked yet, because he's thinking, if the guy can just redo the lesson, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. So he gets down, he asks, no. 10 minutes, blah, 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 blah. And Brett's like, what kind of help was that? Oftentimes, when you see the upset, when you see the anger, you don't see all the things that have happened beforehand, but they're there. Noise, like a fire alarm, unexpected noise, is a very, very difficult one, always distressing, often a source of meltdowns. This is a social story from my friend Kevin. When he was about grade 3, 4, he panicked and melted down every time they had the fire alarm drill at his school. So they wrote out for him what was the usual string of events. Tomorrow's Monday, it's going to be, weather was a big thing for him, so hot and sunny. Going to do opening exercises. After lunch, and they told him when it would be, there's going to be a fire alarm. These pictures he drew. This is when he's totally nonverbal. Okay? So there he is running outside with his EA. Gets outside, we're all going to line up. Great job, everybody. Go back to class. That's a thumbs up there, that little thing there. So after this story was made, he still didn't like the fire alarms, but he knew how to do them, and he knew that he would be okay, that he wasn't in danger, that he would be all right. These are the things that you do to get around meltdowns. In a meltdown situation, it's going to be overwhelming for everybody. It's going to be overwhelming for them. It's going to be overwhelming for you. It is, I will be honest with you, it can be scary because all the wheels have come off and the person has lost their ability to stay in control and to manage in that situation, and it's often very loud. You have to know that they are not choosing this. Okay, this is a meltdown. This is something that is happening to them as much as it's happening to anybody else. Unexpectedly, inadvertently, you've taken them over the edge, or the world has taken them over the edge. So this person is in a panic. All the people in the center need to know what to do in a situation like this. Key people have complete information. So if you are the person who's always with this child, you and your supervisor know exactly what has to happen. You talk to the families, you find out this person does well if they go into a quiet space, if they have some sensory toys, if they have the iPad, whatever it is, and you don't talk to them, you let them calm down, that's the thing to do. This person does well if they can just go out to the field and run around and around and around and around until they dissipate that extra energy. It's different for each person. So key people have complete information, but everybody in your center needs to know basically what the plan is, and know that person by sight, the same way you would with life-threatening allergies. So it's like if, for those of you in the crowd who have peanut allergies, people around you know that if you start to turn purple and are grabbing at your neck, that there's probably a problem. You've probably been exposed to peanuts, and then there's a plan that goes into effect. But anybody seeing you should know that you're the person with a peanut allergy, and that's a likely cause. As for you guys, here's what you do. It's actually not that hard, but it can be hard to do. You must stay calm. You're going to be faced with a person who is elevated, and the more elevated they become, the more calm you must become. You have to have calm voice, slow actions, calm, calm, calm. But it's hard to do that, and do you know why? It's a drawback of your automatic social responses, because when someone is angry and loud in your face, immediately, without thought, automatically, you become angry. You get your fight and flight kind of response. And so they're yelling, and you feel internally like you want to yell too. Here's what you should do. Picture that the person is crying instead of yelling. It really does help. It sounds odd, but it helps. Because when you picture them crying, instead of yelling at you, instead of breaking things, instead of throwing things around, then it allows you to tap into your compassion and the kind of response you would give to a child who was crying and on the floor and very distressed, because that's what they are. They're very, very distressed. The wheels have come off. They're panicked. They're fearful. It is so horrible for them. The meltdown experience is terrible from the inside, and the person loses their usual processing ability. You have to get to a safe spot. You need multiple safe spots in your program. So you're not going to be moving a person up 2 flights of stairs and down a hallway to get to a safe spot. Wherever you are, you have safe spots. When you're out and you're on field trips, as soon as you get there, you say, okay, if there's a problem, that looks like a good safe spot over there, or that looks like a good safe spot. If you cannot move the person to a safe spot, clear everybody else out. It's much easier to clear a room of the other kids than it is to try to drag a person who's already in full-blown upset out and move them somewhere else. The other thing is, as soon as you put your hands on somebody, the situation escalates. So don't. Restraint, now people will disagree, but I will say, in my years of experience, restraint it's a very last resort thing. It's not something that you want as part of a regular program. People should not be restraining other people. What it does is it increases the person's sense that this is really dangerous, that you're an enemy, and that it's a problem. So what I would say is stand back, clear the room, make a safe spot, do social stories ahead of time so that the person knows they're not in timeout. You do social stories, you say, you know what, sometimes you might feel upset. If you feel upset, this is what's going to happen, to help you calm down. So there's always a flight risk. Always, always, always a flight risk. Kids who have not left the building before can leave. And that is almost it's your worst case outcome, actually, because you can lose a kid. Brett, who drew some of those pictures before, when he was in really young grade, he was really little, just maybe about this tall. He got upset because no one was listening to him and things were going out of control, and a person didn't respond as he expected them to, so he turned around, he walked out of the room, and he walked out of the building, and he crossed at least 3 major arterial roads. The fact that he wasn't run over and killed is just a miracle, because he was not very big, he was not very visible, and he got himself all the way to his house before they found him. So these are the things where you need to know that what you're trying to do is you're trying to de-escalate the situation, and that the person themselves are beyond, they're beyond a thinking spot at that point in time. Be very calm yourself. It doesn't help if everybody gets wound up, and if you have a plan, it's easy to stay calm, actually. Following the meltdown, you must figure out what happened, and the most important thing is the perspective of the person with autism. It doesn't really matter. Your information about what happened beforehand and after and whatever is helpful, but it's much more helpful to know what the person with autism thought was happening. So, and sometimes you might solve a problem by accident. Okay, if the solution works, it can't be wrong, but it might not be working for the reason you think that it is. So, here's a situation from a gym class, so similar to the kinds of things you guys do. Gym was a terrible time for Brett. He really didn't like gym class in general. It was loud, it was activities he didn't like, and oftentimes they had to go run around outside, and he didn't like the sunshine and whatever. Anyway, this is basketball, which he does not like. The teacher is saying, all right, I'll sign your team color, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Brett says, I don't think I'm ready, and I don't want to play against red, because red's his favorite color, and he's just been assigned to the blue team. So he says to his teacher, I don't want to play. And the teacher says, sorry, you got to play. So the next thing that happens is he leaves. Okay, this time he didn't leave the entire building, but he left, and he went into an adjacent gym and sat down. And he's thinking, basketball sucks. I don't want to play against red. So meanwhile, in the gym, the teacher has realized that somebody's missing. And I filled in for Brett that the teacher was actually worried, which was something that, you know, in Brett's distress, it sort of went over his head. Anyway, they put over the announcements, would you come to the office? So the teacher, meanwhile, finds him in the adjacent gym and makes a guess, because the teacher, you know what? The teacher's a nice guy, very kind, and understood Brett pretty well, and he knew that he didn't really like gym. So he makes a guess, and he says, I know you're not so good at basketball, so I'm going to adjust the skill levels, and everybody with the same skill level will play against each other, so you're not going to be overwhelmed. So Brett jumps in and says, can I be on the red team? He says, sure. Problem solved. So it was not solved for the reason the teacher thought, and the teacher did do some good things, but sometimes it takes a little bit to find out exactly what was going on. You have to seek out the response and the perspective of the person with autism. So, no surprises. These are very, very basic rules. No surprises. No surprises. I could stop there. No surprises. Really no surprises. Slow down. Slow down. Just the simple act of slowing down. Slow down your talking. Slow down your movement. Give time for the person to perceive and guess what you're going to do next. Slow down. Use visuals to back up your auditory information. Be calm. The higher they go, the lower you go. Ooh, calm, calm, calm. The louder they are, the quieter you are. Be kind and direct. Social cues are missed. If you're making a joke, say, that's a joke. Don't be sarcastic, because that will not be perceived correctly. Ask your supervisor. Don't be shy. Don't think that I should know what I'm doing here, and it'll make me look stupid if I have to ask what I'm supposed to do next. If you don't know, it's better to ask than to provoke a very bad reaction from a person. Respect the person with autism. If you do nothing else other than saying, I'm going to look at the world through the eyes of the person with autism, you won't go very far wrong. Because when you're respecting them as a person with reasons for everything they do, they may not be your reasons, they may not be your reactions, but if you give respect to the person with autism, things will go better. If you do nothing other than actually try to listen to them, try to follow what you think they want to do, try to give them choices and just treat them like a regular human being, then you will not go very far wrong. You won't go far wrong. Look beneath the surface to find out what's going on, and the person with autism should not be the only one expected to change. I know you have a group program going on, but it's better to modify what's going on with that one particular child than to put them in a situation that they can't manage. And supposedly, people who are typically developing are very good at being flexible. They're very good with change. They're very good at finding different solutions. So do that. And if they're stuck like this, then you make the world move around. You make the world accommodate. You soften the edges. Be kind. Be nice. These are fabulous people. You will like them. They are so great. They're so entertaining, they're so interesting, they're smart, they're funny, they're creative. But you have to slow yourself down, look at the world a little differently so you can see that.
How do you create an emergency plan for individuals with autism, like an emergency evacuation?
Okay, you know what? I would say that for staff members, that's a good thing to do dry runs of. It's a good thing to role play. It's a good thing to try out, because that's when you're going to see what are the problems with the plan that you thought would work. So if you're going to take your leaders in training and train them for an emergency situation, both when you're trying to move a person or when you find you can't move a person and you have to clear the area, then designate a person to play the person with autism, to have the meltdown, and then see what happens. How can you safely and quickly evacuate an area? Is the safety plan for the person themselves to prevent themselves from accidentally hurting themselves, is that sufficient? So I would say that I would do dry runs of that the same way that you would do in terms of fire, or the way you practice child missing in the water, where everybody links the arms and goes, and if you're out at a pond. And have you done these things where you do the dry run of how you would search for a child in dark water and things like that? Really best to do them where you try them out, and then the plan should be written out, and you should be prepared to change the plan as you try it out in real life, and you'll see sometimes the limitations.